Hello, this is Miss Oberly with Lesson 01, Changing Units of Measure Within Systems. During this lesson, you will be able to convert between customary and metric units. So let's start by reminding ourselves what metric units and customary units we'll be working with. This would be a great table to have in your resource section of your binder. 1 kilometer equals 1,000 meters, 1 meter equals 100 centimeters, and 1 centimeter equals 10 millimeters. If you haven't already committed this to memory, this is something you want to make sure you have down. Customary units of length, the units of length we use the most often, we know that 1 foot equals 12 inches, 1 yard equals 3 feet, and 1 mile equals 5,280 feet. To convert from larger to smaller, we are going to multiply. To go from smaller to larger units, we will divide. And one thing that you can use on all of these conversions is dimensional analysis. And I know that's something that you mastered last year, but we'll review again in this lesson. Remember, that means you're just multiplying by the ratio of the units. All right. So let's start off with example 1. How do you convert from larger to smaller units? Well, remember we said when we go from larger units to smaller units, we will be multiplying. So let's complete this sentence. To go from 4.2 kilometers to something meters, what do? Well, remember there are 1,000 meters. Oops, that didn't really underline very well. There we go. 1,000 meters in a kilometer. So we're going to use that idea and multiply 4.2 times 1,000 to get 4,200 meters. Same idea over here with part B. When we go from 13 yards to that number of feet, we ask ourselves, how many feet are there in a yard? There are 3 feet in a yard. And again, when we're going from larger to smaller, we're multiplying. So 13 yards times 3 feet equals 39 feet. How do you convert from smaller to larger units? Well, when we go from small to big, we want to divide. So the big thing here you want to remember is we're dividing. So when we're going from 17 millimeters to X meters, we ask ourselves, how many centimeters are in a meter first? But first we'll change millimeters into centimeters. So smaller to larger means we divide. When we go from 17 millimeters to an unknown number of centimeters, we have to take that 17 millimeters and divide by 10 to get 1.7 centimeters, since there are 10 millimeters in 1 centimeter. So now we know how many centimeters there are, but that doesn't answer our question. We want to find out how many meters there are. So to go from centimeters to meter, we need to think about, again, going from smaller units to larger units. So we are dividing, and there are 100 centimeters in 1 meter, so we divide by 100. Our final answer is 0.017 meters. And what about if we were going from yards to miles? Well, let's, with this example, try dimensional analysis. Remember, that's where you set up those ratios and multiply straight across. So we start with what we know. So that's going to be the first thing you plug into your dimensional analysis situation. We know that we're starting with 6,600 yards. Then we have to ask ourselves, where are we headed? We're headed to miles. So I know that yards relate to feet and feet relates to miles. So that's going to be my next ratio. We know that there are 3 feet and 1 yard. And remember, I always want to have yards in top and then in bottom so that I can cancel those units out. All right, so now we're left with feet, but we want to end up with miles. So for our next fraction, we want to have feet and miles being compared. And again, since I have feet in the numerator, I want feet to to be in the denominator. Let's switch colors here. So we have feet and feet, and we know that 1 mile is 5,280 feet. So my feet cancel, I'm left with miles, I multiply straight across the top, straight across the bottom, and then divide those numbers, and that is 3.75 miles. All right, example 3. How do you convert units of capacity? Well, let's complete this first sentence. If I start with 3.7 liters and I want to go to milliliters, I need to think about the fact that there are 1,000 milliliters in a liter. And since we are going to need to multiply here, we would multiply 3.7 times 1,000. Thinking back to this statement from the very beginning, we multiply when we're going from larger to smaller. And in this case, liters to milliliters is larger to smaller. So the big idea there is that we are multiplying. Quarts to gallon. Well, we know that there are 4 quarts and 1 gallon. So we are going from smaller to larger, which tells me we're going to divide. I'm not going to take the time to go through a couple more examples, but the same procedure happens even when you convert to one other unit and then the next. Last example, what about converting with units of mass? Well, again, mass is the amount of matter that an object contains. So these are some important conversions to know. This would be a good table to have, again, in your resource section. So we're first going from kilograms to milligrams, but we want to first convert from milligrams to grams. So there are 1,000 milligrams and 1 gram. So I'm going from smaller to larger. All right, so keeping that in mind, we're going to change from kilograms to grams first on our way to milligrams. So larger to smaller. What do we do when we go from larger to smaller? Divide or multiply. If you're thinking multiply, you are right. So now we have grams, and now we need to go from grams to milligrams. And again, we're going from larger to smaller, so we're going to multiply to get our final answer. All right, so this conversion thing is something that will come up throughout geometry. It's important to keep that in mind.